"Report!" Captain Ilion Drakos barked, his voice cutting through the stillness of the bridge. The sound of boots on the metallic floor filled the otherwise silent space as his crew scrambled to respond. Outside, the stars blinked coldly, indifferent to the ship's journey. The Ironclad Vanguard sliced through the vacuum, its hull gleaming under the dim light of distant stars. The only sound, a low murmur of plasma thrusters maintaining a steady hum of motion, filled the space. Lieutenant Zethar Merrick, his eyes scanning the heads-up display, looked up. "Captain, I've got a signal anomaly. It's faint, but it's there, just past Mars' orbit." Drakos' hand clenched into a fist. There was no mistaking the gravity of his officer's words. A signal out here, this far from human reach, was nothing short of a warning. He stepped forward, glancing at the plasma displays, the swirling patterns of data illuminating his face. "Is it human?" Merrick shook his head. "No, sir. It's not in any of our databases. It's not a communications frequency we recognize. It's bleeding into our system from somewhere else." Drakos' brows furrowed, the words ringing in his ears. "Bleeding? How?" "It's unpredictable, Captain. There's no pattern. It's coming from deep space, but we can't identify the source." "Get me a lock on that signal. Now!" Drakos ordered, his voice low, yet sharp. "I don't like this." A sharp clang echoed through the floor as Commander Ileana Quidrin turned toward him, her face steady, but her eyes narrowing. "You think it's a trap?" Drakos didn't answer immediately. He could feel it in his bones. Something was coming, something the human fleet wasn't prepared for. He could already sense the shift in the air, the deep tension that had been building since the first days of Earth's venture into deep space. The sense of isolation, of being a lone species in the void, had always been there, but now it felt more like a weight, pulling him down. They had stretched too far, and now something was pushing back. "Deploy the Saber Squadron," he finally said, his voice tight. "Prepare the fleet. We're going in." "Sir, what's our play if it's hostile?" Lieutenant Ray's voice came from the weapons console. His fingers hovered above the targeting systems, poised but waiting for Drakos' direction. Ray was one of the best, the kind of officer who needed no second guessing. "We don't know yet," Drakos replied, his eyes never leaving the screen. "But we're not going to sit here waiting for them to make the first move." Drakos pivoted and walked back toward the viewport, staring out at the cold, unforgiving expanse. The silence of space was pressing in around him, but the air on the bridge felt thick. A barely perceptible shudder rippled through the ship's frame as it adjusted course. Something was out there, something neither of them had expected. He could hear the soft tapping of keys as his crew worked to set the course. Every moment counted. His fingers brushed the edge of the console. "Marek, put everything into long-range scans. I want full-spectrum analysis of any possible weapon signatures." Marek's hands flew over the console, the plasma display flickering as his fingers moved in practiced patterns. "Captain, I'm picking something up. Directly ahead, just past Mars. There's a disturbance." "Something or someone?" Drakos asked. Marek paused for only a moment. "It's something, sir. There's a distortion. Like the fabric of space is warping, but it's not gravitational." The words hung in the air, leaving a cold shiver down Drakos' spine. The first step into unknown territory always felt like this, a mix of excitement and dread. They had come too far to turn back now. Whatever was out there, they would face it head-on. "Lieutenant Ray, stand by to raise shields," Drakos ordered, his voice steady despite the sudden rush of adrenaline. "And get me a secure line to Earth Command. We'll need reinforcements. Something tells me we're about to get a first-hand look at what's out there." The Ironclad Vanguard surged forward, cutting through the black void as it approached the source of the signal. Every officer on the bridge was bracing for something they couldn't quite name. But they knew, deep down, that this wasn't just another routine patrol. It was something else. Drakos' hand hovered over the console as he gave the order to engage. The metal beneath his fingers was cold, unforgiving. There was no time to waste. The crew shifted into action, their movements swift and fluid as they prepped for what could be the beginning of an all-out war. The countdown clock for the Saber Squadron flashed bright green as the fighters prepared to launch. Each member of the squadron was a seasoned warrior, trained to execute split-second maneuvers in the heat of battle. Drakos knew it was a matter of time before they would be in harm's way. But he trusted his crew, and he trusted his ship. The Vanguard was a symbol of Earth's resolve, a sentinel standing tall against the unknown. Then, like a snap of thunder in the dead of night, the first sign of danger appeared. A flash, a pulse of light so bright it blinded the sensors for a fraction of a second. The sudden eruption of noise on the bridge was deafening, alarms blaring in every corner. Red lights cut through the dimness, casting eerie shadows over the crew's faces. Drakos' voice sliced through the chaos. "All hands, brace for impact." Before the last syllable left his lips, the ship trembled. A violent jolt rocked the Ironclad Vanguard as a series of sharp explosions erupted across the hull. A violent force slammed into them, tearing through the shields and sending shockwaves across the ship's reinforced structure. "Damage report," Drakos demanded, his voice now cold, each word precise as the chaos of battle unfolded around them. Lieutenant Merrick worked furiously to keep the systems online. "Shields down to 50%, Captain. We've sustained damage to aft thrusters." The bridge rocked again, another volley of enemy fire hitting the Vanguard with brutal force. Drakos' eyes never left the viewport, where he could now see the outlines of alien ships emerging from the distortion, a swarm of metallic, insect-like vessels that moved with predatory grace. He straightened, his mind already working through the strategy. There was no more time for hesitation. "Target the lead ship," Drakos ordered, his voice unwavering. "Fire at will. This is not a fight we're losing today." As the Ironclad Vanguard engaged, humanity's first true test beyond the safety of their own system was underway. The alien ships fired again, their weapons crackling through space, but the Vanguard fought back with all the might humanity could muster. The fight had begun. The ship shuddered again, a violent ripple of force that rattled the walls and sent a tremor through Drakos' chest. The Ironclad Vanguard groaned under the pressure as more energy blasts hammered the shields. Sparks flew from the tactical console, bathing the bridge in erratic light. Drakos' eyes locked onto the viewport, his fingers tightening around the edge of the console. "We're taking fire!" Lieutenant Merrick shouted, his voice tinged with urgency. "Shields holding at 40%, but they're not going to last." Drakos felt his heart rate spike, but his face remained impassive. He knew the rules of engagement. Stay calm, stay focused. His crew needed him to hold it together. "Return fire," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Target the lead ship. Fire everything we've got." The Vanguard's railguns hummed to life, sending slugs of hypervelocity metal streaking toward the enemy. The blasts erupted in bright flashes as they struck the alien vessel's hull, sending it spiraling out of control. Yet the alien ship didn't disintegrate as expected. Instead, it lurched and twisted, its surface seeming to heal before their eyes, almost as if the damage was undone by some unknown force. "Damn," Merrick muttered. "It's repairing itself. We're not going to win this fight with brute force." Drakos' gaze never wavered from the view outside. The alien ships were like shadows on the edge of the Vanguard's sensors, silhouettes that seemed to bleed into the darkness of space. They were nothing like the enemy humanity had prepared for. Their design was sleek, almost organic in nature, with smooth flowing curves that looked as if they had grown rather than been forged. Their surfaces shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the starlight in an unsettlingly beautiful way. "Get me a scan of their hulls," Drakos ordered, his voice cold. "I want to know what we're dealing with here." Commander Eliana Quidrin, at the weapons station, ran her fingers across the heads-up display, sending commands into the system. The air around them felt thick now, charged with the urgency of the situation. The crew's movements were quick and sharp, each person focused, their eyes reflecting the intensity of the battle unfolding. Drakos could hear the sound of breath being held in the room, the subtle clicks of consoles being worked, but it was as if the weight of the unknown was pressing on them all. "I'm getting something," Quidrin said after a tense moment. "The ships, they're not entirely mechanical. There's organic material embedded within the structures, like a hybrid of technology and biology. It's as if they're alive." Drakos' mind raced. This was far beyond anything they had encountered. A perfect hybrid of flesh and machine? It didn't make sense. Nothing about these ships made sense. He glanced at the crew, seeing the doubt flickering in their eyes, a rare crack in their usually unflappable resolve. "Stay focused," he said, his tone sharp. "We're not backing down." The ship rocked again as another wave of energy blasts hit the Vanguard's port side. Drakos could feel the sting of the impact in his bones, like a punch to the gut. The deck under his boots vibrated with the force of each hit, the low hum of the damage alarms threading through the thick tension in the air. "Sir!" Ray called from the tactical station, his voice laced with disbelief. "The aliens! They're not just firing on us. They're targeting our thrusters. They want to keep us from moving." "Damn it!" Drakos muttered under his breath. They were being boxed in, their mobility restricted, and the more he watched the alien vessels maneuver, the more he realized just how little they understood about their enemy. Marek's voice broke through his thoughts. "Captain, there's more. The energy pulses. They're not just damaging our hull. I'm seeing something else. It's interfering with our systems. It's like they're scrambling our electronics." "Lock all non-essential systems," Drakos snapped, his eyes narrowing. He felt the control of the Vanguard slipping, the reality of the situation settling in his chest like a weight. "We need to stay operational. Do what you can to isolate the interference." He turned sharply, the sound of his boots echoing against the cold metal floor. His mind was already working through contingencies. They could fight, but they needed to outsmart these attackers. There was no question of overwhelming them with brute force. Drakos took a step toward Quidrin, his face set. "Can we send a distress signal?" "We can try," she replied. "But whatever they're using to scramble our systems, our comms are fried." His lips pressed into a thin line. It was as he feared. They were cut off. No help was coming, not unless they could find a way to break free from this trap. "Then we make our own way out," Drakos muttered. He walked over to Marek's station, looking down at the scrambling data on the display. "Are we still picking up that distortion?" Marek nodded slowly, his brow furrowing. "Yes, but it's expanding. It's like the signal is becoming a larger part of their field, whatever it is. I can't isolate it anymore." "Damn," Drakos whispered. There had to be a way. He wasn't going to let this end here, not like this. There was no retreat, no running. They had to make their stand. "Get me a detailed scan of their formation," he commanded. "Now. I want to see what we're dealing with. If we can't break through their technology, we'll outthink them. What are their weak points?" Quidrin worked the console, her fingers flying across the touch panel. The display flashed, then settled into a clean, detailed map of the alien ship's formation. Their movements were organized, but there was a flaw. A subtle one, but a flaw nonetheless. "There's a gap," Quidrin said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "Right here, it's a weak spot where the ship's trajectories overlap. We can get through it, if we time it right." Drakos studied the display, his fingers tapping on the metal of the console. His eyes scanned the pattern, every option weighing on his mind like an equation. He had to make the right choice. If they broke through, they might stand a chance. If they didn't, "We'll make our move," Drakos said, his tone clear. "Prepare to launch the Saber Squadron on my mark. We're hitting that gap. Hard." As the command echoed through the bridge, Drakos' heart beat louder in his chest. The tension was thick, heavier than it had ever been before. They would have to fight like they had never fought before. The unknown was closing in, and they could only hope that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't just their technology, but their ability to adapt in the face of the unimaginable. "On your mark, Captain," Quidrin said, her voice steady, but with the weight of the moment in her eyes. Drakos didn't look away from the screen. He felt the weight of his crew on his shoulders. "Mark," he said, his voice unwavering. The Saber Squadron shot into the blackness of space, their engines flaring as they streaked toward the breach in the alien formation. Behind them, the Vanguard lurched, a massive silent beast preparing for its moment to strike. But even as they launched, Drakos knew the truth. This battle was just beginning. The first pulse of alien energy hit the Ironclad Vanguard with brutal force, sending a shockwave through the hull that rattled every crew member to the core. Drakos gripped the edge of his console, his knuckles white, as the ship trembled under the relentless assault. A sharp crack echoed in the distance, followed by the screech of metal twisting under pressure. For a moment, the world outside the ship seemed to fade, the only reality the blinding flashes of light cutting through the viewscreen. "Report." Drakos' voice was hard, cutting through the chaos. "Shields holding at 30%, Captain." Marek's voice was steady, though the tension in his eyes betrayed his calm words. "We've lost secondary thrusters. I'm trying to reroute power." The bridge hummed with the frantic buzz of orders, the rapid clicking of keys, the cries of the crew as they worked to keep the Vanguard alive. Drakos could feel the pounding of his own pulse in his ears, the adrenaline surging through his veins. Despite the dire circumstances, his mind was already working through their next move. The fight was far from over. They were facing an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, but giving in wasn't an option. "We need to move, Captain," Commander Eliana Quidrin said, her voice sharp as she scanned the data on her laser plasma display. "Their ships are moving to flank us. If we stay here, we'll be cut off." Drakos nodded, eyes flicking to the view outside. The alien vessels were closing in from all sides, their sleek, deadly forms hovering like dark predators, intent on finishing what they had started. They were fast, agile, too fast for the Vanguard to outrun. And as the pulse of energy from their weapons continued to batter at the ship's hull, Drakos could sense the overwhelming sense of inevitability creeping in. This wasn't going to be a battle won by sheer force. "We need a new plan," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His fingers drummed against the console, thoughts racing. "I've got something," Quidrin said suddenly, a flicker of hope in her voice. "There's a gap in their formation, a weak spot right at the core of their fleet. It's not much, but it's a shot." Drakos' eyes snapped back to her, narrowing. "What kind of shot?" Quidrin's eyes gleamed with determination. "They've been using coordinated patterns, almost like a hive. But this center, it's vulnerable. They're not anticipating an attack from this angle." Drakos studied the plasma display. The alien ships were closing in, but their tactics weren't fluid. There was something rigid about their formations, something that could be exploited. It wasn't much, but it was something. Humanity was good at finding weak points, and this might be their chance. "Break through the gap," Drakos ordered, his voice decisive. "Get our fighters through there. We need to hit them fast, before they can adjust their formations." Quidrin moved swiftly, her fingers dancing across the controls, sending the order to launch. The fighter squadron was already in motion, their sleek forms cutting through the black void with deadly precision. The Vanguard's hull groaned again as another barrage hit, but Drakos refused to be distracted. He watched the movement of the squadron on the heads-up display, the dots of the fighters shifting as they maneuvered through the space between the alien ships. "Target their propulsion systems," Drakos barked. "Take their mobility away. Disable them." The Saber fighters responded in perfect unison, a single pulse of coordinated fire lighting up the darkness as they launched their attack on the alien ships. The first few explosions were bright and violent, their force splintering the outer armor of the enemy vessels. The gap in the alien fleet wasn't wide, but it was just enough to give humanity's fighters the edge they needed. "Direct hit to their propulsion units," Quidrin reported, her voice low, a touch of satisfaction in her tone. "Their ships are slowing down. We've got them on the back foot." Drakos' grip on the console tightened as he took in the next piece of data that flickered across his display. "They're not retreating." "No, they're adapting," Marek said, his voice filled with disbelief. "They're changing course, splitting off into smaller groups. They're learning." Drakos could feel a knot of frustration tighten in his gut. They had taken the first step, but it was clear now that this wasn't just a simple skirmish. These aliens weren't just attackers. They were survivors. And they had been here before. The implications were chilling. "I don't like this," Drakos said, his voice colder now. "If they're adapting this quickly, they could be planning something even worse." Quidrin's eyes flicked to the main display. Their central command ship just broke off from the formation. It's heading straight for us. That's their leader, Drakos muttered under his breath, and they've made us their target. He could feel the weight of the situation shifting. The enemy wasn't just trying to defeat them, they were trying to break their will, to strike at the heart of Earth's defenses. It wasn't just about victory, it was about domination. "Brace for impact," Drakos ordered, his voice hard. "They're coming in hot." The Vanguard's hull groaned again as another barrage slammed into them. This time, however, it wasn't just energy pulses. The aliens were using a new tactic, a barrage of plasma projectiles that hit like hammers, shaking the entire ship. The force of the impact threw Drakos forward, his face crashing into the cold surface of the command console. The air was filled with the sharp, acrid tang of smoke as the lights flickered and then died, plunging the bridge into an eerie, dark silence. Only the faint glow of the emergency displays illuminated the room, casting long shadows across the crew. For a moment, everything was still. And then, the quiet was shattered by Quidrin's voice. "We've lost power to the main reactor." "Re-establish the connection," Drakos snapped, getting back to his feet. His eyes were wild with intensity. "We're not done yet." The crew was already moving to action, scrambling to restore critical systems. The Vanguard had been built to withstand punishment, but this was something new, something beyond their experience. Still, Drakos wouldn't let fear settle in. Not yet. Not while there was still a chance to fight back. Marek worked furiously at the controls, his brow drenched in sweat. "Sir, I'm rerouting auxiliary power to the forward thrusters. We've got enough to move, but we need time to get back to full capacity." "Time we don't have," Drakos muttered, staring at the oncoming alien fleet. The central command ship was closing in fast. He didn't know what its ultimate goal was, but he had a sinking feeling that Earth was about to face something far worse than just a space skirmish. The air on the bridge was thick, heavy with the tension of unspoken thoughts. Everyone knew what this was. The aliens weren't here just to invade. They were here to destroy. And humanity's first real test was just beginning. "Get me a comms link to Earth Command," Drakos said, his voice sharp. It's time they knew what we're up against. But even as he issued the order, Drakos knew something his crew didn't. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was a battle for the future of humanity, and that meant they would have to sacrifice everything to win. The Ironclad Vanguard groaned as another round of alien fire shook its hull. Drakos could feel the impact in his bones, each blast sending tremors through the ship like a series of violent punches. The lights on the bridge flickered, casting long, erratic shadows on the faces of the crew. For a brief moment, the crew's hurried movements seemed to slow as the weight of their situation sank in, but then the orders rang out. "Report!" Drakos' voice cut through the chaos. Marek, hands flying across his laser plasma display, was the first to respond. "Shields are down to 15%, Captain. We've sustained critical damage to our forward thrusters. I can't keep us in position much longer." Drakos' gaze hardened as his mind raced. The enemy fleet was closing in, the lead alien vessel now less than a few thousand kilometers from the Vanguard. The remaining alien ships swarmed like dark vultures, their curved metallic bodies glinting in the light of distant stars. Their movements were too fluid, too precise for the humans to predict. The alien technology was advanced, almost alive in its execution, but humanity still had one advantage: unpredictability. "We've got no more time for finesse," Drakos muttered under his breath as his eyes flicked to Quidrin. "What's our status on the fighters?" Commander Quidrin's face was set, her gaze unyielding as she watched the growing chaos unfold on the heads-up display. "The Saber Squadron is still engaged, but the gap in their formation is closing fast. We've bought ourselves a minute at best, Captain." Drakos knew that the fleeting advantage wouldn't last much longer. The alien ships were already regrouping, adapting to the human tactic of exploiting their formation. It wasn't long before they'd close ranks again, and humanity's one opportunity for escape would vanish. "Can we push through their lines?" Drakos asked, the question more for himself than anyone else. He could already sense the answer. but he needed to hear it. Quidrin shook her head, her voice low but firm. "We're too damaged. The Vanguard can't take much more of this. If we try to break through, we risk getting torn apart." Drakos' mind sharpened. He wasn't ready to concede defeat yet, but they had to rethink their approach. There had to be another way to turn the tide. He could feel the weight of his crew's gaze on him, silent, expectant. They were looking for direction, for the spark of a plan that could get them out of this mess. "Power down everything except essential systems," he ordered. His voice was steady, though his insides churned. "We need to keep our energy reserves for the next phase. We'll make our move when the moment comes." The crew moved swiftly, their actions synchronized. The atmosphere on the bridge shifted from chaos to a tense quiet as the crew prepared for the gamble ahead. Drakos stood at the helm, his hands gripping the console as the faint tremors of the ship's continued abuse reverberated through the deck. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. "Target their central command vessel," he said, his voice resolute. "They've been in control of the entire fleet. If we hit that ship, we may disrupt their coordination long enough to make a difference." Quidrin's fingers hovered over the display, her expression focused. "Captain, their shields are reinforced in a way that we haven't seen before. Even if we hit it with everything we've got, it might not breach." "It'll be enough," Drakos replied, his voice thick with determination. "We won't be fighting with just our weapons. We're fighting with their arrogance." Marek raised an eyebrow. "You're not suggesting we try the same thing again, are you? The Vanguard won't hold for another round." Drakos turned to him, his expression firm. "No, this time we'll give them what they least expect. We'll use the asteroids in the belt. We've got the terrain advantage, and they're not prepared for a fight in that gravity well." The crew paused, then nodded as realization set in. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had been the human fleet's secret weapon for years. No one, not even the most advanced alien fleet, had accounted for Earth's ability to navigate its dense field of rocky debris. "Prepare to divert all power to forward weapons and thrusters," Drakos continued. "Get us as close as possible without compromising our position. We're going to use the environment, not just our weapons." Marek hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. "Understood, Captain." The tension in the room was palpable as Drakos stared at the alien fleet. His fingers clenched around the console. He knew this could be their only chance to turn the battle around. "Launch the Saber Squadron on my mark," Drakos said, his eyes scanning the rapidly approaching enemy ships. "Once they break the formation, we'll hit the asteroid field. The moment we make our move, they'll follow us. That's when we strike." The crew was working as one. There was no room for error. They had already pushed themselves to the edge, but now the only choice was to gamble everything. "Mark!" Drakos barked. With a roar, the Saber fighters shot forward, darting through the chaotic field of alien ships, like darts in the dark. The alien vessels tried to follow, but they were slower, clumsier in comparison. The fighters broke the formation in seconds, the alien fleet scrambling to adjust. "Get us into the asteroid field," Drakos ordered. The Vanguard lurched as the thrusters kicked in, the ship responding sluggishly, but it was enough. They were now in the heart of the asteroid belt, the massive space rocks providing both cover and potential weapons. The alien fleet hesitated for a moment, clearly not expecting the maneuver. Drakos could almost feel their hesitation in the air, like a stutter in the rhythm of their advance. And that hesitation was all the Vanguard needed. "Deploy the debris," he commanded. Ray's fingers flew over the console as the Vanguard launched a barrage of mining charges toward the largest asteroids. The explosion sent a cloud of debris cascading into the path of the alien ships. The chaos that followed was instant. The alien fleet had to break formation, splintering into smaller, more vulnerable groups as they tried to maneuver through the cloud of rocks. "We've got them, Captain," Marek said, his voice low but filled with relief. "They're scattering. They're not adapted to this." Drakos exhaled, his focus sharp. "Keep the pressure on. Now's our chance." The Vanguard surged forward, using the asteroid field as a shield. The Saber Squadron re-engaged, picking off alien ships one by one as they struggled to regain their bearings. The battle had shifted. For the first time, the Vanguard had the upper hand, and Drakos wasn't about to let it slip away. But even as the first signs of victory appeared, Drakos couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There was something more to the alien fleet's behavior, something they hadn't yet understood. And as the Vanguard moved deeper into the field, Drakos knew that the true challenge was still ahead. The Ironclad Vanguard lurched violently again, as another salvo of alien fire raked across its battered hull. Drakos gritted his teeth, his hand gripping the edge of the console. The ship was buckling under the constant onslaught, the groan of metal echoing through the bridge. A low hiss rose from the air recyclers, almost drowned out by the blaring alarms warning of hull breaches. The view outside the viewport was a mess of debris, shattered pieces of alien ships and asteroid fragments, darting through the void, now a deadly maze. "Shields at 10%, Captain," Merrick reported, his voice taut but steady, fingers moving over the laser plasma display. "We've lost forward thrusters. We're drifting." Drakos' eyes flicked to the heads-up display, the flashing red indicators showing the real-time damage to the ship's systems. His heart pounded, but his expression remained stoic. His crew was watching him, waiting for direction. They couldn't afford to fall apart now. "Set course for the debris field," Drakos said. His voice was sharp, cutting through the tension. "We'll use it as cover. Prepare all systems for emergency repairs. The Vanguard might be damaged, but we're still breathing." Quidrin's voice was calm, though a slight edge of frustration lingered. "The enemy won't give us much time, Captain. Their flanking maneuver is closing in. We've got moments, not hours." Drakos stood straight, eyes never leaving the viewport, watching as the alien ships maneuvered with eerie precision. Despite the damage, despite the bleeding systems, his mind was clear. There had to be a way through this. The Vanguard had been tested before, but this was different. The aliens had adapted too quickly, and every move they made was calculated, as though they anticipated their every strategy. "We don't need hours," Drakos said, voice lowering with intensity. "We need one shot. We take down their command ship, the rest of them will scatter." He turned sharply to Quidrin. "Target the command ship. All remaining power to the railguns. No hesitation." Quidrin's fingers moved across the console, the soft tapping a rhythmic accompaniment to the increasing pace of the battle. "Weapons charging." "I've got a lock on the command ship, Captain. It's taking evasive action." "Lock it down," Drakos commanded, his eyes narrowing. "No more evasion. Fire when ready." There was a brief pause, then the deep roar of the Vanguard's railguns shattered the silence. The impact was immediate, an explosion of light as the slugs tore through the void, streaking toward the alien command ship. For a moment the bridge was filled with the quiet hum of anticipation, each crew member holding their breath. Then came the crackling feedback as the Vanguard's weapon systems powered down temporarily from the strain of the shot. "Direct hit," Quidrin reported. "Hull breach on the command vessel, shields down, but it's still holding together." Drakos' fists clenched. "Damn it! They're tougher than we thought. Do it again. Aim for their propulsion systems. We're not done yet." He could feel the weight of time pressing down on him, each passing second another moment of precious vulnerability. The alien ships were regrouping, maneuvering around the debris field. The Vanguard was barely staying afloat, its thrusters flickering weakly. Every moment the ship spent drifting was a moment that brought them closer to being surrounded. Drakos' mind raced as his gaze shifted back to the alien command ship, now limping, but still an impenetrable force in its own right. "Captain," Merrick said suddenly, his voice strained with disbelief, "their ships, they're retreating." Drakos stiffened, his eyes darting back to the heads-up display. His fingers twitched as his mind went into overdrive. "Retreating? Why?" Quidrin's voice was low, but sharp. "They're pulling back to regroup. It's not a surrender. They've adapted. They've taken heavy losses, but they've learned from the last attack. It's not like they're running away. They're making space for something bigger." "Something bigger?" Drakos echoed, his brow furrowing as his pulse quickened. His gut tightened. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. A warning light blinked on his console, followed by a garbled transmission. It was weak, but the voice, alien, harsh, sounded unmistakably like it came from the command ship. He leaned in closer, his hand hovering over the receiver. "Cut through the interference," he ordered sharply. The communication officer, eyes wide, adjusted the settings, and the transmission slowly cleared. The voice that emerged was broken, desperate. It sounded like something was fighting to be heard. "Earth vessel, you do not understand," the voice crackled, every syllable strained, as though it were being dragged through thick air. "This is not war. This is cleansing. You are but the beginning. You cannot stop what is coming." The transmission sputtered and cut out, leaving only static in its wake. Drakos felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. His gut twisted with an instinct he could not shake. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice tight. Quidrin gave a curt nod. "We heard it, Captain. I don't like it." "Neither do I," Drakos said, his voice low. "This isn't a standard invasion. They've got something else in mind, something we haven't figured out yet." "Shall we prepare for a full counterattack?" Marek asked, his hands hovering over the console. "No," Drakos said firmly, a decision forming in his mind. "We're not chasing them. Not yet." "Sir?" Quidrin asked, her tone filled with uncertainty. "They've retreated. This is our chance." "I don't trust this retreat," Drakos responded, his jaw tight. "They've been too organized, too precise. This was never about brute force. They've got something planned, and I think we've just walked into it." Drakos turned back to the viewport, his gaze locked on the alien ships retreating into the blackness. A slow realization began to settle in. Their enemy wasn't trying to win a battle. They were trying to set the stage for something far worse. He turned back to his crew. "We hold our position. We wait for them to make the next move." Marek hesitated for a moment, but nodded. "Understood, Captain." The bridge was still, the tension hanging thick in the air. Drakos' mind raced, but his face remained a mask of calm. Something was coming, something bigger than this skirmish. The alien fleet had pulled back, but their purpose was still a mystery. They had just unleashed a wave of destruction, and now they were preparing for whatever came next. And Drakos knew, without a doubt, that whatever it was, it wouldn't be easy. The calm before the storm had never felt so heavy. And in the silence, Drakos couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still yet to come. The Ironclad Vanguard drifted in the eerie silence of the debris field, the ship's hull groaning under the strain of countless hits. The bridge was dimly lit by the flickering of emergency lights, the occasional sparks from damaged consoles briefly lighting up the somber faces of the crew. Outside, the alien ships had receded, their dark silhouettes swallowed by the void, leaving only the aftermath of their presence. Drakos stood at the helm, his hands gripping the edge of the console, his thoughts sharp and calculating. His mind was a blur of possibilities, each one darker than the last. The alien command ship had retreated, but its message still echoed in his ears, each word a warning that no one on the bridge could ignore. This wasn't just a war. It was something far bigger. "We've got a moment," Drakos muttered under his breath. "But we don't know for how long." "We've taken a beating, Captain." Quidrin's voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of tension. She glanced over at the damaged screens, her fingers tracing the edges of the console. "We've got systems back online, but not much. I can't guarantee we'll hold up in another engagement." Drakos met her gaze, his brow furrowing. "We're not going to wait for them to come to us. We need to know what they're planning. We need to figure out why they retreated." "They're adapting," Marek spoke, his voice low, almost resigned. "Their movements, they're too calculated. I don't think we're dealing with an invading force anymore, Captain. I think we're dealing with something different." Drakos knew he wasn't wrong. There was something about the way the aliens had moved, the way their ships responded. It was as if they had planned for every eventuality. His eyes flicked to the heads-up display, watching the faint blips of alien signatures. They were still out there, but they weren't coming closer. Not yet. "Can you get us more intel on their fleet?" Drakos asked, his tone softer but laced with urgency. "I want to know how they're organizing, what they're hiding." Marek didn't hesitate. "I've been trying to work the scans through our systems, but they've got something we can't pierce. It's like their ships are cloaked, but not in the traditional sense. It's something different." "What do you mean, different?" Drakos asked, stepping closer, his voice sharp now. Marek sighed, a tired sound that spoke of long hours and endless frustration. "It's almost like they're using an electromagnetic field to distort our sensors, bending the readings before they even reach us. We've been blind to their real numbers." Quidrin, who had been working silently at her station, spoke up. "What if we're not seeing their fleet as it is? What if it's part of the reason they pulled back? They've been testing us, and now they're planning their next move." Drakos' eyes flicked to the viewport. The debris was scattered in every direction, a mess of rocks and alien remnants. The Vanguard was floating in the center, vulnerable, exposed, waiting for something that could strike without warning. "I'm not waiting for them to find us again," Drakos muttered. "I need a full scan of the area. We're going to track their ships, find their weak points. We don't make a move until we know exactly what's out there." Quidrin's fingers moved over the controls. The laser plasma display in front of her flashed briefly, showing an image of the battlefield, but it was distorted. She frowned. "I'm still not getting a clear reading. Whatever they've got, it's more than a simple cloaking device. It's interfering with everything." "Then we find a way to use it against them," Drakos said, his voice unwavering. "We're going to force them into the open." As the crew worked, Drakos' mind raced. The more he considered the retreat, the more he realized they were missing something crucial. If the aliens had retreated to regroup, then they weren't just planning to destroy Earth. They were planning something more systematic, something far-reaching. The pieces didn't fit, and it bothered him. "We've been seeing unusual patterns in their movements," Marek said, breaking the silence. "They're not acting like invaders who want to wipe out a planet. They're methodical." Calculating, Quidrin nodded in agreement. "We're not just a target. We're part of a bigger plan. I don't know what that plan is yet, but we're in the middle of it." Drakos stood silently for a moment, absorbing the information. His crew was right. The aliens weren't here for Earth. Not just Earth. This was bigger than they had ever anticipated. "They want something," Drakos said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But what?" Suddenly the comms officer spoke up, breaking through the quiet tension. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission. It's faint, but it's coming through." "Open it," Drakos ordered immediately, his heart racing. He could feel the weight of the moment, the anticipation building as the faint, distorted message crackled through the speakers. The voice that emerged was barely audible, yet somehow clear enough to send a chill down Drakos' spine. It wasn't alien. It was human. "Drakos, you have to stop them," the voice said, the desperation clear in the shaky tone. They're coming. And they're not just here to destroy Earth. They'll wipe everything out, everything we've worked for. They're here to replace us." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only static in its wake. Drakos stared at the comms officer, his mind racing. The implications were too much to process all at once. That wasn't just a threat. It was a warning. Someone, somewhere, knew something they hadn't. And now, the urgency of their situation felt even more suffocating. "What do you make of it?" Drakos asked, turning to Quidrin. She frowned, her eyes narrowing as she analyzed the transmission. "It's human, all right. Whoever that was, they're in the thick of it. But they're not on Earth. This was a warning." A new realization dawned on Drakos, his heart sinking. "They're not just invading. They're trying to replace us." Quidrin's expression hardened. "And we've been playing right into their hands." The room fell silent as everyone processed the message. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the weight of the unknown. They were no longer dealing with an invasion. They were dealing with something far worse. The aliens were trying to take over, to erase humanity from the equation. "I don't know what's coming next," Drakos said, his voice steady, yet full of urgency. "But we need to be ready for whatever they throw at us. We're no longer just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for survival itself." "Agreed," Quidrin replied. "We need to find their command structure and shut it down before they have the chance to execute whatever they've planned." We're going to need everything we have, Drakos said grimly. But first, we need to figure out what they're really after. This battle isn't just for Earth's future. It's for every world that's ever existed. The Vanguard was floating in the heart of chaos, suspended between the remnants of a battle they didn't fully understand yet. The crew was battered, but their resolve was only growing stronger. Drakos could feel the weight of their collective will pressing forward, but the road ahead was clouded in mystery. What was the alien fleet really after? And why had they pulled back? The answers were out there, waiting for the crew of the Ironclad Vanguard to uncover them. And with every passing moment, the mystery deepened. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. The Ironclad Vanguard floated eerily within the debris field, now silent except for the occasional creak of its hull as it adjusted its position in space. The ship had taken a pounding, its system still in recovery from the assault, but it was far from finished. Drakos' eyes flicked across the heads-up displays, watching as his crew worked with quiet intensity. The alien fleet had retreated, but the battle was far from over. They just entered the calm before the storm. "We're not getting much from the scans, Captain," Merrick said, his voice tinged with frustration. His fingers hovered over the laser plasma display, trying to track any remaining alien signatures. "It's like they've gone dark, or they've shifted into some kind of low-power mode. Whatever they're planning, they're not showing their hand yet." Drakos' lips pressed into a thin line. The quiet of space felt suffocating. "They've pulled back, for now, but we're not going to wait for them to hit us again." The bridge was tense, the weight of the unknown pressing heavily on every member of the crew. They'd fought well, and they had the advantage. At least they had for the moment. But Drakos knew that could change in an instant. He turned to Commander Quidrin, her eyes sharp and focused on her console. "We need a strategy," Drakos said, his voice low but urgent. "We can't afford to stay on the defensive. If they've retreated to regroup, they'll be back. And next time they'll come prepared." Quidrin nodded. "Agreed. We need to find a way to expose them, to find their weak points before they're ready to launch another offensive." Drakos' mind churned with possibilities. The alien fleet had proven adaptable, quick to adjust to their tactics. But there had to be something, some chink in their armor. They had to find a way to break through before they were caught off guard. "Their command ship is still the key," Drakos said, his gaze fixed on the coordinates where the alien flagship had retreated. "It's the center of their operations. If we can disrupt their leadership, we might force them to collapse." Merrick's fingers moved swiftly over the controls, the laser plasma display lighting up with fresh readings. "I'm seeing multiple sub-signatures emerging from the flagship. It's splitting its forces, sending small groups out in different directions. It's like they're trying to confuse us, to scatter our attention." "That's exactly what they want," Drakos muttered, the realization settling into his bones. "They want us to chase ghosts. They're trying to keep us off balance." Quidrin's voice was steady, but there was a sense of urgency behind her words. "We can't keep guessing their movements. We need to get ahead of them. We need to force them into a corner." Drakos considered this, the gears in his mind grinding into place. They needed to trap the alien fleet, force them into a situation where they had no room to maneuver. The asteroid field had been their advantage before, but it couldn't be their only tactic. "Prepare to make a full assault," Drakos said, his voice resolute. "But we're not going in blind. I want everything we've got focused on their weakest point. We'll track their movements, predict their next strike, and hit them before they have a chance to respond." Quidrin's fingers flew across the console, initiating the command. "Weapons are ready. I'm adjusting the targeting systems. We'll have full firepower." Merrick adjusted the scan settings, his eyes scanning the data on the heads-up display. "Captain, I'm picking up something. It's a large signature. It's on the outskirts of the asteroid field. They're moving in closer." "Is it the flagship?" Drakos asked, his eyes narrowing. "No," Merrick replied, his voice tight with unease. "It's not the command ship, but it's definitely one of their larger vessels. It's pushing through the field like it's clearing a path." "That's our opening," Drakos said, the strategy forming in his mind like a plan years in the making. "They've committed to a route. We'll use it against them." He turned to Quidrin, who was already preparing the next set of commands. We'll lure them in. We use the asteroid field again, but this time, we'll lead them right into our fire zone. Once we have them where we want them, we'll hit them with everything. Marek's voice broke through his thoughts. It won't be easy. Their ships are still using that electromagnetic field to distort our readings. We won't know exactly where they are until they're almost on top of us. Drakos looked at the display. The alien vessel was still moving, clearing a path through the dense asteroid field. It was only a matter of time before they would cross into range. Then we'll just have to stay one step ahead. He turned to the crew, his eyes steady. We're going to split the fleet. I want the Saber Squadron to lay down fire on the lead ship. Force it to slow down. We'll hit the flagship once we've neutralized their scouts. Quidrin's voice was sharp, focused. Understood. We'll keep them on their toes. The crew moved with precision, every person working their station like an extension of the ship. The tension in the room was palpable, but there was a sense of determination behind every action. They were going to take this fight to the enemy. Drakos knew it wasn't going to be easy. Nothing ever was. But they were ready. They had no choice but to be. As the crew prepared, Drakos couldn't shake the feeling that the alien fleet wasn't just a physical enemy. It was something more, an intelligence that understood humanity's weaknesses, that learned from every encounter. The stakes had risen. This wasn't just about Earth anymore. This was about their very survival in the galaxy. The Vanguard shuddered again, a reminder that their time was running out. The enemy was getting closer. The Saber fighters launched in perfect unison, their sleek forms cutting through the space between the asteroids. The Vanguard's remaining thrusters strained to push the ship into position. "Captain," Marek said, his voice grim, "we've got incoming. They're closing fast." "Stay on course," Drakos ordered. "We've got one shot at this." The ship moved with a newfound urgency, the debris from the asteroid field growing thicker around them. The alien vessel came into view, the shadows of its massive frame looming ahead. Drakos's heart pounded, but his eyes remained locked on the display. The moment was now. "Now!" Drakos yelled. The Vanguard fired. The salvo from the railgun struck the lead alien ship with a force that rippled through the void, tearing through its defensive shield like paper. The first explosion sent shockwaves through space, and the Vanguard maneuvered quickly, keeping the aliens in their crosshairs. "Hit their propulsion!" Drakos barked. "We stop them here!" The Saber Squadron followed suit, their weapons lighting up the darkness as they strafed the alien ship's side. The alien vessel faltered, but it didn't stop. Yet the damage was done. The plan was in motion. "We've got them where we want them," Drakos said, his voice steady but filled with the anticipation of what was to come. "Now we finish it." The Ironclad Vanguard felt like it was barely holding itself together. Sparks flew from a console as the ship buckled under yet another barrage. Drakos stood firmly, his boots planted against the shifting floor, every fiber of his being focused on the task at hand. The air was thick with tension, the metallic scent of burnt circuits and scorched panels hanging in the claustrophobic silence that gripped the bridge. His crew moved like clockwork, responding to each order with seamless precision, the weight of their purpose pressing them forward. They had been through too much to falter now. "We've done everything we can," Quidrin said, her voice laced with exhaustion, but her eyes burned with resolve. "The Saber Squadron is in position, and our remaining forces are prepped. It's all or nothing." Drakos's gaze remained fixed on the viewscreen. The alien ships were closing in. They had launched everything in their arsenal, their firepower now a dissonant hum vibrating through the ship's core. But something inside Drakos told him that the endgame was about to unfold, that this battle would not be decided by weapons alone. The aliens had underestimated humanity in ways they could never have predicted. "They've learned everything about us," Drakos muttered. "Our tactics, our weapons. But there's one thing they'll never understand." Quidrin turned toward him, sensing the shift in his demeanor. "What's that, Captain?" "They don't know how to fight when it's not about winning." A beat of silence passed before Quidrin nodded, her expression a mix of understanding and urgency. "You mean, we fight to protect," Drakos finished, "not to conquer." The air on the bridge was thick now. Every breath held as the alien fleet, once imposing, now seemed less like an unstoppable force and more like a beast circling for the kill. Drakos' grip tightened around the edge of his console. The plan was simple, born from desperation but fueled by something much deeper. The aliens had learned how to destroy. Humanity had learned how to survive. And now, they would show them what that really meant. The laser plasma displays flickered, and Marek's voice broke through the tension. "Captain, their flagship is within range. We've got one shot at this. If we don't take it, they'll wipe us all out." Drakos took a slow breath, steadying himself. His crew needed him now more than ever, and the weight of leadership had never felt more monumental. He could feel every second stretching into eternity, but there was no turning back now. "We won't fight the way they think we will," he said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "We won't play by their rules." Quidrin stepped forward, her eyes never leaving the screen. "So we give them something they can't anticipate. We hit them where it hurts, where their perfect calculations can't account for the one thing they can't control." Drakos' gaze locked onto the alien flagship, the massive vessel looming larger on the screen. There it was, vulnerable in its arrogance. They had always relied on the cold efficiency of their strategies, their advanced technology, their flawless precision. But humanity had something more, the will to protect, to fight for what mattered. That was something the aliens would never understand. "We're going in," Drakos declared, his voice resolute. "Set course directly for their flagship. All remaining firepower to the forward batteries." "We can't survive another hit, Captain," Marek said, his voice strained with disbelief. "We'll be destroyed before we even reach them." Drakos didn't flinch. "That's the point. We won't survive as a fleet. But we'll survive as humans." The order was met with a quiet, unspoken understanding. They weren't just fighting for Earth anymore. They were fighting for the idea of survival itself, for the future of everything that humanity stood for. And that was more powerful than any weapon they could aim. Quidrin nodded, her hands flying across the console. "Course set. We're locked in." The ship lurched forward, its remaining thrusters straining against the pull of the debris field. The Vanguard hurtled toward the alien flagship with relentless force, a symbol of humanity's defiance. In the silence of space, there was no fanfare, no cheers, only the focused determination of a crew willing to give everything for one final chance at survival. "They're preparing to fire," Marek said, his voice tight. "This is it, Captain." Drakos' hand hovered over the control panel. The final piece of the puzzle was falling into place. He could feel the pulse of the ship, its very core humming with the energy of 1,000 lives hanging in the balance. The alien fleet was no longer a faceless enemy. They were the embodiment of everything humanity had ever fought against. Cold, calculating, devoid of heart. And yet, they were about to learn that their greatest weapon, their perfect strategy, was no match for the humanity they had underestimated. "Fire," Drakos said simply. The Vanguard's remaining railguns erupted in a blaze of light, the deafening roar of the projectiles breaking the tension like a thunderclap. The first volley struck the flagship, and for a moment, nothing happened. The alien ship remained suspended, impervious to the assault. But then, as the second round hit, something shifted. The hull of the alien flagship shuddered, sparks erupting from its outer structure. The alien fleet faltered, as if it too was unsure of how to react to this new force. "We've breached their shields," Quidrin said, her voice incredulous. "Captain, they're losing their hold. It's weakening." But Drakos didn't let up. "All ships, push forward. This is our last chance. Hit them with everything you've got." As the Vanguard bore down on the alien flagship, the ship's crew stood united, knowing that their fight wasn't about winning, it was about surviving, about showing their enemies that humanity would never give up. The Saber Squadron broke through, their fighters darting in and out of the destruction, attacking the flanks of the alien fleet with unrelenting force. The alien ships began to scatter, some breaking formation, others firing wildly as their command structure crumbled. It was chaos. But in the heart of that chaos, the Vanguard and its crew found their strength. They had turned the tables, not with superior technology, but with something far more potent, the will to protect. Drakos stood at the helm, his gaze unwavering as the alien fleet began to falter. "We've shown them what it means to fight for more than just survival," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Humanity isn't just another species to be crushed. We are the shield of these worlds. We fight for those who can't." As the final shots rang out, Drakos knew the battle was won. Not just for Earth, but for every world that would follow. The alien fleet was retreating, broken, its command structure shattered. And though the Vanguard had taken heavy damage, the crew had stood firm. They had given everything to protect what mattered. "They're retreating," Quidrin said softly, her voice full of awe. "We did it." Drakos looked around at his crew, the exhaustion on their faces evident, but their pride shining through. "We did it," he echoed, his heart swelling with a fierce pride he'd never known. Not just for Earth, but for all of us. The Ironclad Vanguard slowly turned away from the wreckage of the alien fleet, its crew battered but victorious. They had proven something. That humanity wasn't just a footnote in the history of the stars. They were a force to be reckoned with. The darkness of space stretched before them, but for the first time, Drakos felt the weight of the unknown no longer felt like a threat. It was a promise, one that humanity would fulfill. "Prepare to return to Earth," he said, his voice calm, resolute. "The war is over, but the future has just begun."